Diversity and Inclusion in TV, Radio and Film. Now, diversity and inclusion in media aren't just limited to focusing on the underrepresentation of women, people of color, those from the LGBTQ community, but also those with a disability. I mean, it massively impacts on people being excluded from careers in the media industry. And I'm going to be talking about this with my guest today and focusing solely on this and her experience. Now, let me introduce her. She's group client lead at Bauer Media. She's got over 20 years experience working in audio and radio. And she's a huge advocate of mental health in the workplace. Welcome, Loren Eley. So good to have you.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So Loren, as I mentioned in the intro, you have been diagnosed with a mental health disorder. Would you care to share with us what that is and just explain a little bit about it?
Of course. So I was diagnosed at the age of 29. So I was already working at Bauer Media with bipolar disorder. And what that is, it's characterized by manic highs and depressive lows. So you fluctuate in mood, but not usually very quickly. It's normally kind of for a sustained period of time. And I've had 2 episodes where I've had manic episodes and I've been signed off work sick, put on medication, and then kind of slowly reintroduced back to the workplace.
So does it become very evident to others when you experience this?
Yes, definitely. The first episode, because I had no prior knowledge of it or didn't know what was happening, couldn't also tell, because when you're in it, you kind of feel like you're fine. And I was talking really fast. I was saying things that weren't necessarily appropriate. My energy levels were really high. I was super productive, trying to do a million things at one time, and eventually became really unwell and had to be seen by a psychiatry team. And then in my second episode, it kind of happened when I was on holiday. So people at work didn't see it happen, but it was predominantly due to lack of sleep through a flu and a chest infection. So I was coughing all the time, and then not sleeping is probably my biggest trigger to having a manic episode.
Now, what's interesting is about what you said is that you got diagnosed at 29. You were already in the workplace. So could you share with me, was it baffling to you then? I presume it was, when you experienced certain things prior to being diagnosed. And can you just share with me the difference between prior to being diagnosed and post-diagnosis?
Sure. So people with bipolar disorder, it can take an average of 9 years to be diagnosed, because you can have a depressive episode and potentially wrongly be diagnosed as having a depressive disorder, or there's other mental health conditions that people are misdiagnosed with until they have seen both a manic and a depressive episode and diagnosed accordingly. I had a bit of a weird blip when I was a teen, but we just kind of wrote it off as a sort of a one-off experience. So it wasn't until my manic episode, and in between I kind of feel like I've been quite fine. So I kind of have these major episodes and then nothing in between. And then after being diagnosed, it was really weird trying to get my head around the fact that I'd been given a lifelong condition, even though I just had one kind of episode. But now, having had my second episode, I appreciate it could happen at any time, at any stage in my life moving forward. And it is a lifelong diagnosis.
Now, you've been working at Bauer for quite some time. Were you at Bauer when you received the diagnosis? And if so, how was that received?
So I had been at Bauer about 6 or 7 months when I became unwell and was signed off sick. I was off for about 9 weeks and then did a phased return. They were great about it. They were really supportive. No one knew why I'd been off. And then slowly, when I came back and I started feeling comfortable, I would tell people on a one-to-one basis, but they were really supportive. And I've been with Bauer ever since. And then I had a second episode in 2019. That was a lot longer recovery. I was off for 5 months. Again, they were very supportive. I was on sick pay for a period of time and then statutory sick pay for the rest. And also they have what's called an EAP, which is a employee assistance program. So they have a helpline that you can call at any time. And then through that, I received counselling. So my workplace facilitated me having counselling when I needed it most.
Wow, that's incredibly supportive given the amount of time you've had to take off work. And you're in a very particularly senior role at Bauer. So that's not impacted adversely on your career path at your organisation.
No, so since I was diagnosed in 2012, I've been promoted twice, and yeah, now I'm one of the sort of senior salespeople in the department, and yeah, they've been incredibly supportive, and they do a lot, and I think over time in the last 10 years they've really changed, and particularly in the last sort of 3 or 4, they've really come into their own in the diversity and inclusion space.
And are you open these days at work, because you obviously have your own department, but you work in sales and the marketing side of things. You clearly have to liaise with the other departments. Are you open about your condition, and or do you have any fears about mentioning this disability?
I have always been really open. I haven't felt like there's anything to be ashamed of. It's something that happens to me, and it's a part of me, and I work through it and get better. I've almost gone to the opposite, where I'm such an ambassador. I deliver presentations around, like I did a presentation on Mental Health Awareness Week around self-care strategies that I use to kind of stay well. I did a presentation to the entire company on World Bipolar Day this year, talking about what the illness is, and myself and another colleague shared our experiences related to the workplace so people could understand how it felt like for us and what they might have seen on the outside looking in. And I'm not ashamed to talk about it. And whenever I do, I have loads of people both giving lovely comments and saying they've learned a lot and they've really enjoyed it, but also people coming to me privately and saying, wow, I'm impressed you can speak so openly. I've suffered with XYZ. And I think opening that conversation is really important.
Wow, that's opened up and given confidence for others to speak up and get the support that they need, hiding it, because you can't always get the support that you need in the workplace.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's probably the thing I'm touched by most, is having people come to me and explain they're now seeking help, or they felt like actually maybe it wasn't something to be ashamed of and they can talk to other people about. So I think that's been really rewarding for me. So
now looking at your actual job role, would I be correct in saying using the word episode, or would that be wrong?
That's how I use it, yeah.
Okay, so when you experience an episode, how does that hinder your work? I mean, what kind of impact does that have on you? Are you then left to play catch up? Because ultimately you don't know how long it's going to take you to recover from an episode, right?
Yeah, so the first episode I was working on a really major project, and my boss basically stepped in and delivered that project when I was not there. And when I returned, because that had kind of caused the episode, it was due to work stress, that first one. So when I returned, they didn't put me back on that project. I just worked on other things. When I was off in 2019, it was for 5 months. And that was quite significant. I did a handover when I first realized I was going to be off for a while, and I kind of said, these things need to happen, and I sent it back and said, please don't contact me. And so work then just picked up and delivered. And after a few months, my line manager did say, we may need to get someone in on a temporary basis to cover your workload. But actually, by the time I came back, they hadn't managed to facilitate that. So actually, I stepped back in. Other people had just taken on slightly more of their normal responsibilities in order to cover the workload that I wasn't there doing.
No, that's really great. It was managed. So tell me, is there a fine line between people inquiring about your disability and crossing the line?
Yes and no. I like to be really open, and I like to think that people can ask me anything. And if I'm feeling kind of in a vulnerable state or in a hypersensitive state, I'll just say, can we discuss this another day? But that doesn't happen very often. There was one person that sort of, we at the end of the presentation at World Bipolar Day, we offered a coffee chat off the record if anyone wanted to come forth and have a chat and share experiences. And we did have someone come to us with that. And then they wanted to book in a second date. And on the email, they kind of said, I'd love to share with you how I think you can sort of, fix yourself, basically, how you can get to where I'm at. And so when I put the coffee date in, I just kindly sort of said, we're here to share experiences, not solutions, because everyone's journey is different. And they were like, noted, thank you, that's fine. So there was only one occasion that's ever happened to me in the 9 years that I've had the illness.
Yeah. What's interesting is like the term BAME, which doesn't really go down with a lot of people from those from diverse communities, because for many, it's considered divisive and rather than cohesive. Now, the term disabled, that label, how do you feel about that? Because after all, it is a label.
Well, I mean, bipolar disorder is a disability. It's on the government website as listed as a disability. I never used to feel like I was particularly disabled when I had my 2019 episode and I was really, really unwell. I had to rely on my partner as my carer, and I really did feel like I was a disabled person because it really stopped me from doing anything in my life. Now I would tick the box disabled if I needed to on a form. But we like to, at Bauer, we try and spin it in the opposite direction and use it to empower. So as part of the Belonging at Bauer, which is our diversity and inclusion forum, we have different pillars. Some of the ones you've mentioned, our disability and mental health pillar, we call enable. So it's all about empowering, and you are able to do whatever you like, because just because you might have a disability of some sort, it shouldn't hold you back. So we try and flip it and call it enable. So that's, it's a more positive label.
Yeah. What's interesting is, and what's great is having these kind of discussions to take the secrecy or whatever might be around being able to discuss openly what affects people. I think it's really great, and it just creates a more open space in which other people can be free to be themselves, truly be themselves, and be helped and encouraged, because everybody should have equal opportunity. Everybody should have the opportunity to succeed at work. Now, across the wider industry, what do you think that needs to be done? I mean, of course, at Bauer, you've shared it's a great experience. They're hugely supportive. And we know that things are gradually, but very incrementally changing. But what more do you think can be done in the industry to really make a difference?
I think it's continuing to talk about things and make people aware. I think there's a shocking statistic that 16% of the UK population has a disability, but within the audio industry, only about 6 or 8% have a disability. And I think that does need to change. You know, we do need to be reflective of the audiences we serve. And I think individual companies in the industry are putting diversity and inclusion at the forefront of their agenda. And I think that is a hugely positive step, and the things that we do to encourage that conversation. The Radio Academy did the disability and audio webinar, of which I was a guest, and we talked about our experiences. Bauer, our Enable team on the Belonging at Bauer diversity and inclusion team, we created a video for International Day of Persons with Disability, and we had a whole host of different types of hidden conditions that people might have, and talking about their experiences, what it's like in the workplace, where they might need a bit of support sometimes, and what to expect. And I think it was just really eye-opening, and it was people of all different levels as well. So some very senior, like on the board, right down to kind of junior members of the team, and all sorts of different physical and emotional and mental kind of conditions. And I think it's just opening the conversation and making it really people aware of what they are, what that means, and then actually it's fine to still work and have that condition. You don't have to, not work.
And what about attracting more talent from people with a disability, a funnel through which they can enter into the media industry, whether that's TV, radio, audio, your part of the industry, or film? Do you think there needs to be some strategies, some initiatives? Or some people may argue, well, everything needs to be done on merit. What are your thoughts?
I think it is important. I think people at Bauer, we've changed the way we recruit. So we now have a new, very strict recruitment process, and it includes being open and recruiting from different pools, different talent pools. Traditionally, a particular role would be advertised with the same recruiter. So you're kind of getting the same talent coming through the door, and it's the same people, and you're not actually broadening and trying, to reach different communities. So I know that is one really key way, is to just target different communities and try and be as open with the recruitment process as possible. And then it still comes down to merit and the potential that candidate brings. So I think it's that fine balance between the two.
So essentially widening the pool of candidates to choose from, and then it's still obviously down to merit. Yeah. And you say, as I mentioned in your introduction, you're a huge advocate of raising awareness around this. Can you just share how you do that? Obviously, you're talking to me, and you're making a difference at work and other initiatives. But is there anything else that you're doing to get people engaged into this conversation?
Absolutely. So a side project I work on is a community internet radio station called Gaga Radio. I do a show on there called Growing Your Self-Care Toolkit.
Right.
So it's all about, little things that you can do to improve your mental well-being and kind of stay well. But on World Bipolar Day, I launched a brand new radio show, a one-off special to celebrate that. And I interviewed 2 people that have bipolar and 1 person whose husband has bipolar and she's his carer, and we talked about the different experiences that they all had, and all the amazing things they're doing off the back of it. So yeah, I'm trying to kind of keep it a really big conversation and make sure people are aware of it. And because I think people understand depression, they understand anxiety, they get a lot of airtime in the media. But I think complex disorders like bipolar or potentially schizophrenia or personality disorders are not as commonly talked about, and kind of there might be a bit more of a stigma around them. So I want to make sure that people are aware that it's nothing to be frightened of, and this is what happens, and be aware of it.
Now, Loren, it's been great having you share your story within your career with your diagnosis. However, yours has been a very positive story. Not everybody's going to have that same experience as you. So what would you have to say as somebody who does manage this on a daily basis to others out there who may not be in an organization which is perhaps as accommodating?
I think it's really interesting. I think from a support perspective, you do have the NHS, you do have charities that can offer support, helplines, etc. I think it's also worth flagging that disabilities, you're covered by law, that people cannot discriminate you based on your condition, and then there's also something called reasonable adjustments. A workplace is by law needs to make reasonable adjustments for someone with a disability, whether that's wheelchair access and space down corridors, or better technology to be able to enhance whatever, improve their situation. And I think I had, when I returned to work after 5 months off, I had an occupational health assessment, someone assessed me, and then we discussed ways that Bauer could help me by improving my day-to-day work life. And so by law, those things are available to you.
No, well, that's great. Loren, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for sharing and being so open about your diagnosis and your condition, and how you've super successfully dealt with everything in your career. And, it's so encouraging for, I hope, to others watching and joining us today who may be in a similar position to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I'd like to hear from you. If you have a disability and you work in this business, whether it's TV, radio, or film, I'd love to have you share your experiences with me. Please feel free to get in touch with me. You can leave a comment down below or contact me across my social media platforms. I really would love to hear your stories. Also, if you're at entry level and you want to break into the business, again, across any of the disciplines, how are you getting on? If you've got a disability, how are you finding things? Is it all positive? Are you coming across challenges? Whatever that might be, please do let me know. I'm always interested to hear what you've got to say. Also, if you'd like to keep up to date with all the interviews in my series, then please subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the bell icon for regular updates every time I upload new content. As always, it's been absolutely fantastic having your company. I'm really grateful that you joined me today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.